The heavy news came to Umunnachi on a cold morning. The palace was unusually quiet. Even the guards at the gate stood still, as though waiting for something they did not know how to face. It was Chief Okeke, the oldest and most calculating elder in the council, who first voiced it. "If we don't act now," he said, tapping his staff on the palace floor, "Umunnora will bleed us dry." "Then let them come," backed another chief. "We will defend ourselves like our ancestors did." "With what?" Chief Okeke turned sharply. "With stories of the past? Umunnora is not fighting with might. They are coming with fire and swords." The king, Igwe, sat quietly on his stool, listening. His eyes were sunken, his face weary. He was no longer the man he had been 20 years ago. The death of his wife had dimmed him, and the weight of ruling a vulnerable kingdom had aged him further. "There is one thing we can offer," Chief Okeke said. "Something they do not expect. Something that will confuse them long enough to consider peace." Everyone leaned in. "We can offer them what they have never taken. A hand in marriage." The room became silent. "A marriage?" someone whispered. "A royal marriage between our daughter, Princess Adamma, and their king," Chief Okeke clarified. They summoned the king's advisors, the chiefs, even a messenger who had once traded goods in Umunnora's market. The idea was absurd, risky, and dangerous, but the truth was simple. Umunnachi had no army to match the fire of Umunnora. Their lands were rich, their markets were fruitful, and that made them a target. But a marriage, that would make them family. No warrior spills the blood of his in-laws easily. The king did not sleep that night. He walked the corridors of the palace like a restless shadow, touching the stone walls his wife had once decorated with chalk patterns. At dawn, he stood outside his daughter's room and listened to her laugh as she braided her maid's hair. It broke him. She was his only child, his entire heart, the last gift his wife had given him before the gods called her home. But duty is a cruel thing. It demands what love cannot understand. He knocked on her door. Adamma was seated on a wooden stool, dressed elegantly, her gold bangles stacked on each wrist. She looked up, surprised. "Papa?" she said, rising. The king didn't speak for a moment. His eyes took her in, her gentle face, her mother's dimples, the kindness in her eyes. She had always been special and talented. She had a laugh that made even the palace guards smile. "My Ada," he said, his voice cracking slightly. She frowned. "What's wrong, Papa?" He took her hand and led her to the bench near the window, where morning light spilled in. "There is talk of war," he began slowly. "Umunnora is gathering strength. We've tried all sorts of gifts, but nothing has worked." Her fingers tightened slightly around his. He continued, "There is one thing we haven't offered, one thing they haven't taken." Her heartbeat slowed down. "I want to send you my daughter as a bribe to King Ofodile," he said, struggling to hold her gaze. There was silence between them. Adamma looked down at her lap for a little while, then backed up at her father and asked, "When do I leave, Papa?" The king blinked and asked her, "You're not afraid?" "I am," she said, "but what scares me more is watching our people die because I didn't go." Her response broke him. For the first time in years, Igwe wept, not as a king, but as a father. He gathered her in his arms and held her tightly. They both sobbed uncontrollably. In the warrior kingdom of Umunnora, the king's court was a place of iron. No emotions, no softness, only strategy and strength. When the message arrived, it was brought by a middle-aged emissary from Umunnachi. He bowed low and presented the scroll on one knee. King Ofodile, young and respected, took the scroll and read it in silence. The elders watched him. His warriors leaned forward, "They are offering you their daughter?" his advisor asked. King Ofodile raised an eyebrow. "A peace offering in the form of a woman. Do you want her?" his advisor asked. He didn't respond immediately. He looked at the fire pit in the center of the room. "She's their only daughter," he said finally. "If they're offering her, then they must really be desperate." "Then reject it. We can take their land in a week," one of the chiefs thundered. But King Ofodile shook his head. "No," he said, "we will take their land, but we will also take their jewel." Then he smiled sarcastically. "She'll be mine," he said. "Let them send her." He expected someone spoiled, decorated in jewelry, frightened of blood and sweat, a delicate bargaining chip. But he was wrong. Princess Adamma left Umunnachi under a grey sky. The whole village stood still as her carriage rolled through the gates. She wore a royal blue outfit and held her head high. She was not alone. Behind her rode Nneka, a young servant girl, just 2 years younger than Adamma, who had served her since she was little. Beside the carriage was Mama Ifeoma, her childhood nurse, now middle-aged, wise and firm. "I'll go with her," she had told the king. Someone must constantly remind her where she comes from. They traveled with 2 guards and a cart full of bride gifts like yams, wine, gold, beads, and silk. The road to Umunnora was long and quiet. Nneka chattered nervously. Mama Ifeoma kept praying to the gods of their land under her breath, and Adamma, she said nothing. She just watched the trees pass by, her fingers brushing the beads at her neck. At the gates of Umunnora, Adamma stepped out of the carriage and was met by silence. The warriors who stood watch said nothing. A young man took her bags. Another gestured wordlessly towards the palace. Inside, the king was waiting. King Ofodile stood with his arms crossed, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. He had expected softness, fragility, a girl who would tremble before him. But what stood before him was a woman whose eyes held both pride and pain. Her beauty was captivating, and her posture spoke of grace. He looked at her and thought, "This one may not break easily." Princess Adamma bowed slightly. "I greet you, Your Majesty." He nodded once and replied, "You will be shown to your rooms. The wedding is tomorrow." And then he walked away. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, the palace servants began preparing for the wedding, but there was no excitement in the air. Adamma sat on the stool while Mama Ifeoma styled her hair. The silence in the room was heavy. Nneka moved slowly around the table, arranging beads and jewelries, her eyes red from crying the night before. "Turn your head," Mama Ifeoma said gently as she styled her hair. "You must look like the queen they never expected." Princess Adamma stared into the bronze mirror in front of her. Her face looked pale, drained. She hadn't slept. Her eyes felt dry, her lips stiff. Even the gold necklace around her neck felt like a collar. "There are no drummers playing," she whispered. "No one sings when 2 enemies are tying a knot," Mama Ifeoma replied. "But don't be deceived. They are watching, every one of them." When they finished dressing her, she stood. She wore a red George outfit, embroidered with gold peacocks. Coral beads circled her neck, stacked so high she could barely turn her head. Her wrists were wrapped with bangles, and her ankles rang softly when she moved. She looked like royalty, but she felt like she was being walked to the gallows. The palace courtyard had been cleared for the brief ceremony. The elders of Umunnora sat under a shade, their faces unreadable. King Ofodile stood alone beside the sacred stool, his arms folded, watching her approach without an iota of emotion. Adamma stepped forward with 2 guards behind her. She walked until she stood next to the man who was now her husband. The officiating elder gave his blessings. Prayers were offered to the gods. A small clay cup of palm wine was placed in Adamma's hand. She turned and offered it to Ofodile. He took it, drank it, and handed it back to her without any smile. The elder declared them husband and wife. The crowd remained silent. There was no cheering, just long stares and hushed whispers. King Ofodile turned and walked away without waiting for her. Adamma remained standing there for a few seconds before she followed a palace maid who signaled for her to return inside. The room they gave her was at the far end of the palace. It was isolated, with a narrow window and stiff bedding. The curtains smelled like dust. There were no flower carvings or murals, just plain walls and wooden floors. Later that evening, no one came to check on her. No one brought food. Even the maids from earlier disappeared. She removed her beads with slow fingers and folded her dress carefully. Her body was tired, but her mind kept running. Mama Ifeoma knocked lightly and entered with a bowl of yam porridge she had begged from the kitchen. Nneka followed behind with a jug of water and a cracked clay cup. "Eat small," Mama Ifeoma said, setting the bowl down. "Even prisoners are allowed food." Adamma stared at the food. She was hungry, but her throat felt tight. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands placed on her lap. "Is this how they treat their queens?" Nneka asked under her breath. "Princess Adamma is not a queen yet," Mama Ifeoma replied, lowering herself to the floor. "She's still on trial." The next few days were long and dull. Every morning, Adamma woke up early and bathed in cold water. She dressed in silence and walked the corridors slowly, memorizing the layout of the palace, not to feel at home, but to stop getting lost. The other women barely acknowledged her. When she entered the room, their conversations stopped. They whispered as she passed. They never bowed for her. They never greeted her. Every day, at breakfast, a meal was left on a wooden tray outside her door. No one said who brought it. And at dinner, nothing came at all. The king never visited her, not even once. Mama Ifeoma advised her to be patient, but Adamma felt the weight of the silence pressing on her like a stone. She was used to attention, not foolish praise, but warmth, meaningful conversations, laughter, and smiles. But here, the walls spoke louder than the people. On the 5th day, while sitting alone in the palace garden, Adamma heard soft footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw a young woman in a flowing gown with pale pink patterns. Her hair was curled into a delicate bun, and she carried a basket filled with guavas. "Good afternoon, Your Highness," the woman said with a gentle smile. Adamma blinked. No one had ever addressed her like that since she arrived. "I am Chiamaka, the king's cousin. I live in the North Wing. I thought I should come and greet you properly. It must be very hard for you settling in our kingdom." Adamma stood up and gave a small bow. "You're the first person to say that." Chiamaka sat beside her and opened the basket. "I brought you some guavas. They are sweeter in this season." Adamma took one hesitantly. It was ripe and warm from the sun. "I know what they say about you," Chiamaka said quietly, "that you were sent to be a spy, that you were bought with gold, that you have no reason to be here." Adamma's spine stiffened, but Chiamaka added, "They don't know you, and they're not interested in learning. They've already decided you don't belong here." Adamma nodded. "That much is clear." Chiamaka tilted her head and asked her, "Do you want to change that?" "Yes," Adamma replied. "Then you need more than beauty and grace. You need a strong stomach and sharper eyes. The palace isn't about who is kindest. It's about who learns the rules fastest." That evening, Adamma went to the dining hall. She had heard from Chiamaka that the king sometimes ate his dinner there when he wasn't in council meetings. When she arrived, she found him sitting at the far end of the long table, eating roasted plantain and chicken alone. She walked in quietly and sat across from him. A plate of food was set for her as well. She picked at the plantain, feeling his eyes move towards her and then away. "I haven't seen you since the wedding," she said softly. He said nothing but continued eating like she was invisible. "Do you always avoid your wife?" Adamma spoke again. He looked up sharply. "Woman, you're not here to be my wife," he said. "You're here as an offering. Let's not pretend otherwise." Adamma's heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. "I didn't come here pretending. I came here to save the lives of my people. If that offends you, I can eat elsewhere." She stood and picked up her plate. King Ofodile stared at her with surprise, or maybe respect. He didn't stop her, but the next morning, when her breakfast arrived, the tray had fresh pawpaw and peppered snails, which are her favorites. She didn't smile. She simply ate in silence and told Nneka, "Tell the kitchen I said thank you." That evening, the palace halls were quieter than usual. The wind carried the scent of rain, and the sky over Umunora turned a deep, uneasy gray. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Princess Adamma sat by her small window as Nneka oiled her neck in silence. Mama Ifeoma had gone to fetch hot water from the kitchen, muttering about the princess' sore shoulders. A knock came at the door. It was firm, measured, and commanding. Adamma stood up slowly. "Come in," she said. The door opened. King Ofodile stood there, alone, no guards, just him, holding something wrapped in red cloth. Adamma's stomach tightened. He stepped into the room, but didn't move too close. He didn't speak at first. Then his eyes met hers. "There's something I need to show you," he said with a low voice. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a folded letter, its seal broken. "I wasn't meant to find this," he added, his gaze darkening. "But now that I have, you and I need to talk." He dropped the letter on her table and walked out. Adamma stared at it. Her hands trembled. She had never seen that letter before. To be continued in part 2. You can subscribe and turn on your post notification to get notified when we upload part 2.